the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Today is the Feast of Pentecost. If you look over there, I know it says Pentecost, right? I think it says Whit Sunday over there, right? Is that right? There's a couple of different names for this. Walter, our verger, asked me to explain this, and so I will briefly. It's known as Pentecost because historically, in the reading from Acts, you get a glimmer of this. There is a Jewish feast called Pentecost, and it's 50 days after Passover. And so in the early church, the first disciples were basically all Jewish. On Pentecost, which matches up with Easter as well, because Passover and Easter were at the same time, that first Easter. On Pentecost, the Holy Spirit descends with the flames of fire and all the languages. And that's where the name comes from. It basically means 50 days later. So that's Pentecost. The red that we wear on Pentecost is a symbol of the fire. And so we wear red. Some people wear red in church. The big red flags are out front today. I did ask Walter, can we leave them out? He said, no, people come by and damage them, which is bizarre, but or steal them. So the flags are only out today. The other name is Whit Sunday. And there's a little more interesting history to that kind of gets lost and convoluted. Probably it comes from Anglo-Saxon through Iceland when the Normans conquered England. In earlier Icelandic, the Christians there called this day basically Whit Sunday in their language, and the Whit is where that comes from. And it probably was a reference to wit was as in understanding, and the Sunday of understanding. You may have noticed I read a different opening collect than what was in your bulletin. There are two. The one I read deals more with understanding. And so the idea behind it is that this is the Sunday when the disciples were filled with the Holy Spirit of wisdom and understanding so they could go out and proclaim to the world the good news of the risen Jesus Christ. Now that creeps into England and gets adopted as the title for the day. It's worth noting in early English they were using Pentecost. And so for a long time there were two titles in England, Pentecost and Whit Sunday. And as these things are, people forget what it meant. And Whit Sunday turned into White Sunday. And the clergy started wearing white on Pentecost in England for a very long time to symbolize White Sunday. And ladies started wearing white dresses to church, and people started getting baptized, which had been the custom anyway, and wearing white, and everyone was wearing white. And then they switched back to Pentecost, and now everyone wears red. Does that help you? It does explain, I think, a couple of things, that there are a lot of different ways to do things. And the reading from Acts is a good starting point for a lot of different ways to hear things, right? They all hear in their own language the good news of Jesus and the list of different people in different places. And that story, I've told this, I'm sure, like every Pentecost, but that story always reminds me of my second Mass Eucharist at St. Mary's in Times Square 18 years ago when I had just been ordained a priest. Now, I had preached before, but this was my second service after my ordination to the priesthood, and I was alone. Some background, if you haven't heard me say this before, St. Mary's is in Times Square. It's a city block long. It goes between 46th and 47th Street. The doors are open all day. People come through. You get a wide variety of people who come in for any given service. St. Mary's liturgically is as high up, what they say is as high up the candle as you can get. Smells and bells and lots of lights. We have our 6, they're called office lights, those 6 candles behind the altar. And ours you can light normally. At St. Mary's, we had to have an extendo lighter attached to a stick. It was about 30 feet up. So it's about as high up the candle as you get in that sense. And it's liturgically a different parish than we are. But be that as it may, my first service, and I called it Mass because that's what they call it there as well, but my first service happened to be on the feast of William Tyndale. William Tyndale is a very famous translator of the Bible who translated the Bible from Latin into English, and at the time that was not something you were allowed to do, and he was burned at the stake. Wow. And so we remember William Tyndale as one of the braver and first translators at his time. Eventually things went on and the Bible got translated into different languages, and I had preached for his service to basically an empty church, city block long. It was noon mass, and maybe there were 3 or 4 people, one all the way at the back, and somebody sitting up front, and me, and the sexton, and that was classic Episcopalian, literally as far apart as you can get, right? And I had preached that it was a wonderful thing that we had translations following off of this Pentecost reading, because not all of us know all these different languages. Very few of us. I'm pretty good at Greek. Took a lot of Greek. I can read the New Testament in Greek. My Hebrew is not good at all. My Latin is actually very good. But most of us don't know Hebrew, Greek, or Latin, and the Latin is just a translation anyway. And I said it was good that we had translations because we couldn't understand Greek or Hebrew. And actually, most of us couldn't understand Elizabethan English, the very famous King James translation. And at that moment, when I said it was good that most of us couldn't understand the King James and that we had the version we were using, from the back of the church, I got booed. The guy that was alone stood up and literally started booing me in church. Boo! That's what he said. And I thought, well, it wasn't that bad. And then he said, the King James is the inspired and only authorized version, and all other translations and versions are of the devil. And I responded, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, please stand and join me in saying the Nicene Creed, because I was done my sermon. But it's an interesting, St. Mary's, the story's not about that event, but St. Mary's is a church that's very high church, but its defining feature in addition to that is you never know who's going to be in church. And you really never know who you're going to meet there. And it's a wonderful place because it's at the crossroads of the universe in Times Square. And so lots of different people come through there. Another church that I went to when I was growing up, we used to go skiing and didn't get to go skiing all that often because my father is an Episcopal priest over weekends. But we did go skiing from time to time for an extended trip at a place called Sugarloaf in Maine. And in my opinion, it's the best skiing in the Northeast. But Sugarloaf has a great thing that very few ski resorts have, and I hope they still have it. There is a Catholic church chapel that you can ski to at the end of the day. And so you can actually go to church on Saturday night, and the service was timed so the lifts would stop, and about 15 minutes later, Mass would happen. The defining feature of that service was this sound. Because everybody's wearing their ski boots constantly. I have no clue what was said. All I know is that lots of people were there, and they were happy to be in church, and that it was offered. There's another church in retirement. This is my plan. I'm very far off from that, but I know what I'm going to do. I know a priest who, when he retired, bought season tickets to the Baltimore Ravens and set up a tailgate Eucharist at 10 a.m. in the parking lot of every Ravens home game. And he drew an interesting cast of characters at that hour to his service. Now, I tell you all these different things. There's a lot of different ways to do church. We have a particularly gorgeous church here. It looks great with the red and the white as we move through Easter, Pentecost, and I love being here. But it's worth remembering when we talk about and hear the reading from the Acts of the Apostles that there are a lot of different ways to do church. I think it is a wonderful blessing that we have different denominations. In Pelham alone, you can go to the different places. You can go to St. Catherine's, which is going to be a little different from OLPH. which is going to be quite different from the Huguenot church, which is going to be quite different from the Community Church of the Pelhams. If you go over to New Rochelle, there's another Episcopal church there called Trinity. It's quite different from us. If you go to City Island, Grace Church Episcopal, they're all different. It's okay to be different. It's okay to be a different Christian. And the reason for that, and our hymn, Hail Thee Festival Day, which we just sang, has 2 lines in it. Myriad tongues and infinite gifts of the Holy Spirit. There are infinite gifts of the Holy Spirit. Not all of us has every one of them, but all of us have some. And we use them radically differently. We use them in ways that other people might not think is how they would. That's okay. We use them in ways that God pushes us to use them. And I want to encourage you on this Feast of Pentecost, Whit Sunday, 2 things. Give thanks for the diversity of the church worldwide. Many languages, styles, ways of doing things. Give thanks for that diversity, because it is a very, very good thing. Give thanks for the diversity of gifts that different Christians have. That's part 1. Part 2, I already know you're using the gifts that God has given you, probably in ways that you don't even realize. In your prayer life this week, today, but all week, pray that the gifts that God has given you, the spiritual blessings, are revealed more and more in your life. Think and pray over, what gifts has God given me? How do I use them? How can I use them better? What gifts do I wish I had? Can I hone those and work on those? And give thanks that you don't have every gift, but you've got the ones you have, and God is working through you. So pray that you can use your spiritual gifts more and more and more. And give thanks not just for what God has done to you, but for how God has worked in other people's lives as well. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.